Hello and welcome to week 13 in biopsychology here. And here we are on chapter 13. How convenient is that? Chapter 13 is the biology of learning and memory. And personally, as an educational psychologist, it's interesting because this particular chapter, it not only reveals our vast understanding of the brain and its relationship to learning and memory, but it also reveals our vast lack of understanding of the relationship between the brain and learning and memory. Some of these mechanisms we understand at a very surface level, but yet they do not necessarily correlate with sort of like the grander observations that we have of learning and memory. We're just beginning this journey. Even though we've been at it, and even though we know great, awesome things. I mean, just like I've been saying all along, our textbook is full of miracles. I mean, just understanding the complexity of the human brain. And here we are in learning and memory and how we recall things and how we store and how can we engage in practices that allow our brain to effectively store information. Just remarkable. The discussion it relates to a personal story, and that I believe I put it in there, but if I haven't, I'm going to describe it here. The personal story is my daughter, when she was in elementary school, the school was advocating that she be put on Adderall, which is a drug for ADHD. And I was sort of like, well, I didn't have any problem with my daughter having ADHD, but I wasn't really sure whether or not that was an accurate diagnosis or whether it was more motivational, more issues with her social butterflyness and her kind of world that she lives in, which remains to this day. But so when we went to see the doctor to talk about Adderall, the doctor was an advocate of putting my daughter on that. And she made a statement that I thought was interesting. She said, well, why not think about Adderall as rather than dealing with some sort of brain disorder, that it's actually a performance enhancement drug? Now, I know that she was trying to convince a skeptic as to whether or not she should be on that drug or not. But I thought it was an interesting approach to it, because my answer to her was, well, if it's a performance enhancement drug, I'm sure you give it to all of your children as well. That conversation didn't go as well as I thought it should have gone. I was still a little skeptic about it. Mom won out, and she did get onto that drug, and I'm not sure if it really had, it's kind of difficult to determine what was the difference, whether she matured out of it or not. She was also placed in a special program within the school where she worked in small groups and had a teacher that kept on her to get stuff done. And as far as I'm concerned, that was the magic that got her. She's extremely successful now academically, and graduated from college and all that stuff. But nonetheless, this notion, of drugs being used to enhance cognition, learning, and memory. What about that? As we learn more and more about even the rudiments of intelligence and memory and learning on a biological basis, do we intervene? Now, we intervene externally, non-biologically, all the time. We come up with tasks for learning. We do more hands-on stuff for some people. We have slideshows. We have colorful animations. We have different methods of teaching, different methods of assessment. We do all of these things to try and capture and enhance learning from an external point of view, from the environmental. What do we do? Do we equal that with biological interventions, which may, in many cases, be largely more effective than some of those external things that we spend millions of dollars on? So just like we might deal with depression with a drug, even though therapy is probably a good idea too, the drug is cheaper, faster, and many times more effective than therapy. external versus internal, environmental versus biological, basically, nurture versus nature. Where do we go? So when we think about something as sensitive as learning, intelligence, and memory, what if we had a drug that just made us remember more, made us think better? What does that entail? What does that mean? Would you use it? Would you give it to your kids? Would you think if your kids couldn't afford it, but somebody else's could, is that unfair? Those kinds of things. So we're going to have a discussion about that. The quiz is factoid. You're going to be matching terms with definitions having to do with the biology of learning and memory. Parts of the brain associated with memory, memory processes themselves as we understand them, and then just kind of going through that as a quiz. Really looking forward to this discussion, because how do people feel about performance enhancement drugs for intellectual abilities? Now, you probably heard the term performance enhancement drugs when it's applied to athletics, and we do not like that. That's unfair. People who are using those drugs, blah blah blah. But what about intellectual capabilities? What if we could, now understanding too that in some scenarios, a person's lack of intellectual abilities is a huge barrier in their life to even engaging in the world, depending on the extent of that particular disability. What if we could change that? Would that drug effectively target persons with intellectual disabilities as unwanted? Because it's something to be fixed. Now, anybody who's worked in that world understands that those individuals with those intellectual abilities are total human beings, worthy of living, worthy, and sometimes for some people, kind of better than some other people in many ways, So that if we create a drug for something, not only are we addressing that something, but we're, in a way, society is sending a message that people like that are not wanted because we're treating them. We're going to change them to something else. All kinds of sort of ethical and moral questions associated with drugs that affect our mental capacities. But yet, who wouldn't want to give their grandfather who has Alzheimer's a drug so that they could perform better, longer in their life? Who would restrict that? What parent might restrict the opportunity for their child to be intellectually superior and lead them to success on when we look at that individual basis? I'll stop there. If I haven't inspired you to run to that discussion and start posting things, then I'm not sure what else I can do. We'll have that discussion online. The quiz is easy schmeezy, just matching. So have a great week with this. We're week 13. We're approaching the near end to all of this. And so be strong. It's supposed to be beautiful this week. Get outside. Let that nature kind of thing. But there was an article that came out, a significant, huge, big article. I'm actually going to feature it next year in my course books. And that is, they have definitively found out spending time in nature positively affects nearly every single mental health disorder in significant ways. Being in nature, that was the variable, not just getting outside, being in nature. So I think we're moving in the right direction there. Okay, anyway, that's this week. Have a great week. Be well. Get outside. Get some nice sunshine today. Perform well. We're at the end of the semester, and I will see you next time.